Welcome to our first pre-recorded lecture in COMM350. This lecture is actually going to be over Chapter 1, right at the beginning. We're going to be starting with some very basic information about research. And I want you to start thinking about research, hopefully in a fun way, because we're going to focus on how we know what we know. And we even did a little poll on the first day of class to test your knowledge. How do you know what you know? How do you know what's true? How do you know what's fake news? Where do you get your sources from? Do you believe everything your mother tells you? How do we know information? And as scholars and academics, we believe in investigating the information and taking a look at the sources and the credibility and learning to become good researchers of the information we receive. So we're going to get started, but first I have, I hope, a kind of funny way of introducing to you a little bit about how we know what we know and things that are happening in society today that make it a little more difficult when everything is fake news. So I hope you enjoy this kind of fun, humorous little introduction to how do we know what we know.
Global warming real. You win this round, science. But what do you really want? What's your end game? Asif Manvi has more.
Science claims it's working to cure disease, save the planet, and solve our greatest mysteries. But what's it really up to? From global warming
I don't believe global warming is real.
to evolution
Absolutely not. I don't believe in that.
to the HPV vaccine.
Her daughter suffered mental retardation as a result of that vaccine.
It seems science is up to something.
There are a substantial number of scientists who have manipulated data so that they will have dollars rolling into their projects.
Could these Republican candidates be right? Tonight, we answer the question, science, what's it up to? To get the cold, hard facts on science, I sat down with Republican strategist Noel Nickpour.
Scientists are scamming the American people right and left for their own financial gain.
Now, do you have any, I don't want to say evidence, not data?
I think every American, if they really thought about it, would have a gut feeling that some of these numbers that the scientists are putting out are not right.
I knew it. I knew it. I mean, I didn't know it, but I knew it.
One of the most notorious swindlers is Columbia biology professor, Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Martin Chalfie. I caught up with him at his luxurious palace of science.
I'll play along here. What are you studying?
I use the nematode Cenorhabditis elegans to study nerve cell development.
So, the oldest grift in the book, right? The old nematode switcheroo.
It's a funny grift. Probably no other occupation has so many people questioning what they do all the time and demands that you confirm the experiments.
But even that's a neat little trap.
Scientists are the only people qualified to comment on scientific theories. This is what raises doubt with not only Republicans, but Americans.
It's like, why are surgeons the only ones allowed to perform surgeries? And other surgeons are the only ones who get to say whether or not this surgery is necessary or not, right?
Absolutely.
Doesn't make any sense.
It never makes any sense.
And the only other people that can check to make sure that they're not manipulating
Are other scientists.
They're very smart, these scientists.
That's what I'm saying.
It's all too obvious once you know the scam.
It's not really a scam. All that we do in science is subjected to a process called peer review.
But who are your peers?
The peers are other scientists.
Bingo! It's like you went on trial for rape and the jury is full of rapists. I mean, how are you different from a rapist?
Definitely not a rapist.
That's what a rapist would say. Tell me how you are not a rapist.
Am I really supposed to answer this?
The worst part is the rapists are coming for your children.
Thousands of elementary school students, high school students do science fair projects, and they do a spectacular job.
You're sick.
You're not going to get away with this. With our most vulnerable at stake, I went undercover to a national science fair to try to save them from science.
I investigated LED materials using quantum physics.
Jesus, what have they done to you?
I needed to open their eyes.
I did a computer simulation of dark matter effects on galaxy rotation.
I know. You're just a bright-eyed kid stepping off the school bus, just wanting to know how the universe works. Right?
Yeah.
Who told you that this data is true?
My brain got me these results and this conclusion.
Stop listening to your brain. Start listening to your heart. Years from now, a video of this pops up on the internet, and you're going to break your parents' heart.
My parents support me. They think science is good.
Pretty soon, you're hooked on that grant money, looking for the next big score. That's how it works. Is that what you want?
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, this has taught me a lot.
What I witnessed was heartbreaking. And sadly, whether science is peddling quantum physics or evolution, the corruption of our children happens every day, right under our noses.
It's very confusing for a child to be only taught evolution, to go home to a household where their parents say, well, wait a minute. You know, God created the earth.
What is the point of teaching children facts if it's just going to confuse them?
It confuses the children when they go home. We as Americans, we are paying tax dollars for our children to be educated. Mm-hmm. We need to offer them every theory that's out there. It's all about choice. It's all about freedom.
I mean, it should be up to the American people to decide what's true.
Absolutely. Doesn't it make common sense?
Tragically, the future offers little hope.
You want to be a scientist?
Yeah.
This country is in big trouble, and it's all because of people like you.
Sorry.
Sorry is not good enough.
Asif Manvi, we'll be right back.
Okay, obviously, if you're not familiar with Jon Stewart, the former host of The Daily Show, it is meant as an entertainment piece, so hopefully you took it in that vein. So I think it brings up some good points, though. I mean, is everything nowadays just about choice? And whatever you want to be true is whatever can be true. And I always forget to close out the next video. All right, teachers teaching online, it's crazy. All right, well, let's start with two differences right off the bat in information that we can receive. There is academic research. You just saw a scientist in an academic setting who is doing academic research. And your book talks about this and defines the difference between the two. Academic research, we say, is very rigorous. You do have to have your peers review your work. It is subject to review after review after review. They work very hard to make sure that the conclusions make sense. We're not manipulated. We're not plagiarized. I mean, just think about how much your teachers are always on you to make sure you're not cheating or you're not plagiarizing or you're not doing anything that is falsifying information. Academics have that same code. And so academic research is also done firsthand by researchers for the better good. I guess I should let you know now, big secret's out, just like his Palace of Science. We do not get paid, per se, to do academic research. It's part of our job. We're expected to do it. But we receive no money from a publication in a journal. Zero. It's part of our job. So there are not incentives or monetary things tied to academic research. It's just not the way it works in academia. In proprietary research, however, there probably is money. These are folks who are paying to have research done. I believe a lot of businesses use proprietary research. That is, they go out and they pay someone to survey people or find out in a focus group about their product. Proprietary research is conducted in a certain industry. So when you see on TV that Crest toothpaste says 9 out of 10 dentists choose Crest, that's probably coming out of proprietary research. And it could even be coming out of Crest's own lab. So proprietary research is usually got some industry strings attached to it and probably has some monetary implications as well. It doesn't mean it can't be true or good research, but typically we question proprietary research to make sure that the industry has conducted it at the same standards as academic research. All right, your book goes on to talk about some other ways of knowing or how we know things. And certainly, I remember teaching a basic speech class and students would say to me, what do you mean I have to source cite that? I just know it. And I'm like, well, you learned it somewhere. Where'd you learn it? How do you know that's true? So knowing by tenacity is really just, we know because it's a commonly held belief. Most people believe this. We accept it to be true. These are very, very basic statements like you need oxygen to breathe. We know that. That is a knowing by tenacity. We live, well, I would say this one, the earth is round. Until recently, though, we just saw the passing of one of the world's biggest flat earth leaders a little while ago. So again, it relies on just customary knowledge. That's that customary knowledge that you say, well, I just know. And if customary knowledge changes, we get pretty upset about it. So you probably have always known Pluto as not a planet. But when I grew up, it was a planet. And now it's not a planet anymore. And it's like, how can that be? This is basic customary knowledge. If you touch fire, you will get burned. We know things by authority. I asked you right in the beginning, do you believe everything your mother tells you? I should not have. I remember she told me when I was going to like my first boy-girl swim party at 15 or 14, I don't remember, something like that. She said, if you kiss a boy in your bathing suit, you'll get pregnant. And I believed her. We usually look to authorities or even doctors, anyone that has more credibility. And it's difficult because we are told to question. Not every doctor is correct, but if you don't think they're correct, how do you find out differently? Do you just believe whatever you read on the internet? I would say a lot of you probably do. And that's unfortunate. We have to find deeper ways of evaluating the research. My mom is an internet junkie. She believes everything she reads on the internet. And I'm saying, Mom, not all that, but he says he's a doctor. And I'm saying because he put on a lab coat, we actually have academic studies of a person faking being a doctor, completely making up an entire disease and people believing him, even though everything he said was made up simply because he was a doctor. So again, a lot of this class is also going to be about questioning how we know these things and questioning their truth and validity and how do we know. Knowing on a priori grounds. This one's kind of interesting, but it deals with a priori is before, and when we learn something before we have direct experience with it. So I watch my sister color on the walls when she's little, and I see her get in trouble. Guess what? I know not to color on the walls or I'll get in trouble. So it's what happens when we know something before we have a direct experience of it. I have a niece who hates, she's like, all boys are jerks. And I feel like she's seen too many bad relationships so that now she just won't even entertain the possibility of having any herself because they're all going to turn out bad. It's not, always like that, but it's this idea that we learn things through watching other people. And certainly we take that into account. You've probably gone to an event back when we, could go out to big events and you didn't quite know where you were going, but you might have said, oh, they look like they know where they're going, and you just followed them. That's just knowing on a priori grounds. And the last one, where we're going to spend a lot of our time in this course, is the method of science. This is a kind of prescribed method where we reason, collect data, review the data, and make conclusions about what it's saying. And we're going to go through that method of science in terms of the Toulmin model. And I'll talk about the Toulmin model in just a minute. But I want to talk a little bit about theories. One of the things that science then allows us to do after we do experiments after experiments after experiments, we can come up with a theory. Some of you, most of you are probably also in COMM300. We recommend taking these two classes together. And you're going to learn all the different theories that are out there in the communication world. My job is to tell you how we got to those theories, how we do research using those theories. So these two classes go together, but they have also some distinctly separate ways that we're going to look at things. So theories are simply explanations for how things work. We have theories now about the steps people incur in a breakup. Don't know if you knew that, but it's true. We've observed it and studied it time and time again, and we can roughly say these are the 5 stages of terminating a relationship. It's a theory. You're going to learn different communication theories like uncertainty reduction, speech accommodation, compliance gaining theories. All of that is on the 300 side. Okay, that's what you're doing in 300. What are we doing over here? We're talking much, much more about how they got to those theories. What research did they do? And was that good research to make that theory? That's where we are. We're on the research side. So oftentimes we use the Toolman model, which is presented in your text in chapter 1, as a way to look at the arguments people come up with before they even get to a theory. So let's make a claim. I'll ask you, who talks more in a public setting, men or women? All right, the answer is men. And I could show you studies where that's true. Actually, if we were in the classroom, I could show you that is true. Because if you sit in a classroom at SDSU, I would wage that women probably outnumber the men in the classroom and the men get called on and talk more. That would be data. I mean, we could go in and watch that and observe that and statistically kind of calculate what are the odds of men versus women speaking in that public setting. So it's all about making claims and supporting those claims with evidence or data or statistics or narratives. And that's what we're going to be looking at. The warrant is what links the data and the claim. We're going to be talking more about that, but it links the two together. It says basically this data is accurate and good data to support the claim. That's what's happening. The warrant connects the data. It says this is good data. We can say it's been vetted and came from reliable sources. Therefore, we can support this claim. I should also mention something now, a little pet peeve of researchers. Nothing is ever proven, okay? Do not ever say that again. At best, something becomes a theory. We support things, but we can never 100% say we've proven something. That's a little too concrete for the scientist world. So, here's a claim. I said, come up with some kind of statement about SDSU. I actually used to say that the parking is great at SDSU. And you all would moan and go, what the heck, lady? No way. What is your evidence for that claim? Well, let's think about it for a minute. My evidence for that claim is I get to park in faculty parking. Aha, so I'm making a claim based on different data, right? So is that data good data for making that claim? It's actually not. I would have to say that parking for faculty at SDSU is good. That would be the appropriate claim to make. So hopefully you start seeing how these things work. If I say online learning is the best ever, okay, we don't have any data yet. Actually, the data we do have about online learning at this point probably would not support that claim. And if I only asked one person and they said, I love it, is one person sufficient for me to claim that all online learning is great? No, that warrant doesn't hold up. So take a look at the Toolman model. It's kind of the basis for how we start evaluating arguments. And it's kind of the difference as well is, did you read something, and I don't want to bash it too hard, in National Enquirer, or where did you get that information? That's that standard for evaluating evidence. And I picked on the National Enquirer because probably not the most reputable. I remember reading a story in it once about a woman who swallowed a toothbrush and couldn't stop laughing because it was tickling her. And I was just, usually we know that they get sued for slanderous stories and don't have the most credible sources of evidence. So we would not link data and claim based on that. A couple more little terms they throw out at you along with data and evidence and warrants. They talk a little bit about rules, laws, principles, formulas. I do want you to know these definitions, but be careful not to get them mixed up. Laws are laws of nature, okay? And what we mean by that is, if I fall out of a tree, I'm not going to just float away. Gravity, I will fall down. We know that. It is a law of nature. Principles refer to specific legal rules, okay? And that's where I'd say these two, they're not quite what they mean. Principles are legal rules, like you should wear your seatbelt. Wearing your seatbelt predicts that you will have a better chance of saving your life in an accident. So principles are our legal statutes. Laws are nature, like we need oxygen to breathe, gravity exists. Formulas are mathematic principles, things we know to be true. A squared plus B squared equals C squared, 1 plus 2 equals 3. These are formulas we know to be true. And the last type that we are going to deal with in here quite a bit is statistics. Looking at aggregated numbers, that means like the mean, the median, the mode of something, to try to draw conclusions. So I used actually a lot of voting data last year from SDSU in the primaries to see who SDSU students were going to vote for in the primaries. And the paper had actually run an article based on a survey of over 700 students at SDSU, which is good. We'd say that's a good standard, a good warrant, and collected statistics. I think most people were for Bernie, if I'm remembering correctly. Sounds about right. But we're going to use statistics. Please do not get scared about that. We're going to make it pretty simple and do some introductory material into how do we know those statistics are correct. There was an article I read, fascinating too. It said that women tend to hang on to their favorite article of clothing longer than their longest romance. And when I hear these kinds of statements, like pop culture ones, I want to know, okay, how many women did you ask? Where did those women live? What's their marital status? Things like these are the kinds of questions we should be asking when we hear stuff like that. Another statistic from that study was that I think it was like 70% of women believe in love at first, don't believe in love at first sight with a man, but they do believe in love at first sight when it comes to an item of clothing. And trust me, I wanted to know all about that study, where it came from, who they talked to, how many people they sampled, etc., to see if that was a valid study and a valid claim. All right, so we are quickly going to be moving now already into Chapter 2. The end of Chapter 1 talks a little bit more about academic ways of knowing, certainly, our professional associations, scholarly journals, and even on page 11, the notion of peer review is mentioned, which you heard in the Jon Stewart video. We're going to be talking a lot about that as we dive into quite quickly here, basically research and the library. So starting to vet, how do you know where to find good sources? How do you find them? What are they? Etc. So we'll be diving into the library on next time. So I will end with what is the beginning of Chapter 2 very quickly here, which is the 3 paradigms or ways of knowing. We know by scientific method, which we've already talked about, has a very precise step-by-step process. It's very quantifiable. We know we can learn from other stories or narratives. We're going to call that interpretation. We learn from other people's experiences. That's valid. And we will talk about knowing by criticism. Knowing by criticism is looking at and evaluating artifacts and things that have already happened for social justice, for good, for bad. We might look at a speech and say, was that speech something that added to the value of humanity? Or those are the kinds of ways we'll start to evaluate. I'm going to hold off a little bit because, again, this is coming to us from Chapter 2. And there's a great table on page 26 that's going to start in identifying these 3 ways of knowing. These 3 ways of knowing are incidentally also the 3 ways we do research. We do research through the scientific method, through numbers and surveys and experiments. We do research through interviewing and learning people's narratives and stories. That's interpretation. And we have scholars who basically look at speeches and texts and artifacts and I don't want to say criticize, but they evaluate them for their potential impacts in a societal world. Those are the kinds of essays. So you will be reading all 3 kinds of research in this class. You'll learn to know when you find a journal article that's scientific method, when you find a journal article that's interpretation, and when you find an article that's a critique on some issue of social justice in society. These 3 ways of knowing are also going to be one of the classes you have to take later on. So keep that in the back of your mind. There is a point. This course kind of surveys them all. Then you will have to pick one of these in depth. So you'll take an entire class just in scientific method, or an entire class just in interpretation, or an entire class just in rhetoric and criticism. So I'm going to be, my job is to introduce them all to you so that you get a little snapshot of each kind that's going to serve as your basis for your next investigating course. And then we will also look into, in Chapter 2, the notion of qualitative versus quantitative. I'm going to hold off on that till next time. And next time we are actually going to dive into the qual, and these 3 ways of knowing. We'll get a little more in depth into Chapter 2 and pick it up right from there. But hopefully that gives you a good base to start thinking about what's credible, what's not, and how do I know that's true? Be thinking about that.